Welcome. My name is Véronique Feppel. I'm a senior project manager on road safety at the International Transport Forum at the OECD, and it is my true pleasure to moderate this session on the safe system approach, enablers, challenges, and lessons for implementation. This morning, we will review the progress made by countries, cities that have adopted a safe system approach, highlighting key enablers and challenges to implementation that can inspire others. During the discussion, we will also emphasize the role of political leadership, the importance of system-wide coordination, and the need for continuous innovation to accelerate progress towards the 50 by 30 goal. We will also try to respond to some critical questions, such as what key enablers drive successful safe system implementation, and how can low and middle-income countries leverage them? What are the biggest blockers preventing wider adoption of the safe system approach, and how can they be overcome? And how vital is political commitment in implementing the safe system, and what examples highlight its impact? To respond to these questions, we have an amazing panel that I would like to welcome, starting with Britta Lang from the Global Road Safety Partnership. She is a senior manager, and she oversees a range of road safety initiatives in low and middle-income countries. Thank you, Britta. Amy Pidwill, she is a road safety strategy lead at Transport for London. Welcome, Amy. Professor Shou Wang, you're a professional and mechanical engineer at the University of Putra in Malaysia and chairman of the MIROS, the Malaysian Institute for Road Safety Research in Malaysia. Welcome, Professor. Sumaya Al-Nayadi, the Director for Road Safety in Abu Dhabi. Welcome, Sumaya. And James Bradford, Technical Director at the International Road Assessment Programme. Welcome, James. And to kick off this session, we have an outstanding speaker, and I would like to call Jessica Trung. She is a Global NCAP Senior Advisor working towards democratizing vehicles safety globally. Welcome, Jess.
Can I have my slides, please? Good morning, everyone. You all get a medal for actually turning up on time for this session. So welcome. So as Vero so eloquently outlined, we're going to talk about safe system. And it's been about 30 years since the road safety world was introduced to Vision Zero and the safe system concept. And I sort of just want to highlight whether or not we think this philosophy and approach is still relevant for us today, and if so, what some of the enablers and challenges might be as we continue to apply this approach as we work towards our goal of 50% reduction by 2030. So just a very quick recap, because I'm sure everyone is very familiar with what the safe system approach is all about. But essentially, it's understanding that we as humans, we will all make mistakes. Regardless of how perfect we think we are, we all make mistakes at some point in time. And unfortunately, when some of those mistakes play out on our road, that can result in serious injuries and fatalities. And it's also understanding that we're very fragile as humans. You know, there is a set tolerance before our bodies will start to break. And especially on the road, when we get hit by a car or we encounter some sort of crash, that's when we're especially fragile. So what does that mean in a safe system context? Because we're fragile, we're fallible, we need to be able to design a system in a way that can account for our fallibility and fragility. And that, I guess, is the crux of what the safe system is all about. In order to be able to get to the idea of zero by a certain time, we need to be able to protect ourselves. But the safe system philosophy and Vision Zero isn't just a set of principles. It actually provides some technical advice on how we can design that system in order to achieve zero. And one of the key design principles around the safe system is understanding that the human body, once again, has a set tolerance. So if we want to get to that reduction, we need to design our system according to that set tolerance. Unless we do that, we are going to continue to see fatalities and injuries on our roads. And research has advanced a long way since Vision Zero first came out in '97, introduced by Sweden. Research has advanced to a point now where we know what those set human tolerances are for different road user groups in different crash configurations. So we can use this information to help us design that system in order to achieve the reductions that we want to see. But unfortunately, that is not what we're sort of seeing around the world at the moment. We're still seeing speed limits that are being set too high. We're not seeing the best vehicle technologies being deployed. We're not seeing the safety features that we know would protect us on the road in the infrastructure space. And it's not been designed according to these set human tolerance levels that we know. And importantly, the safe system isn't just about implementing one particular area of work. In order to achieve that human tolerance level and not have those fatalities and injuries, we need to truly apply a safe system approach. I think oftentimes we think, okay, if we work in just speeds or just vehicles or just infrastructure or just human behaviour, we are applying the safe system approach. But realistically, if we want to be able to manage the speed effectively and manage the energy effectively in the system, we need to be able to implement all these different elements together in a systems approach because they have synergistic effects. How we apply our speeds affect how our infrastructure works. If our speed limits are set too high, a lot of our vehicle technologies may not work effectively. And, working on just human behaviour and telling people how to behave is not going to be able to effectively manage those energies either. So it's not enough just to implement one or the other. In order to apply a safe system approach, we need to be able to integrate them in a good way to be able to more effectively manage the energy that we're creating in the system. So 30 years on, is Vision Zero still possible? Can we achieve those reductions that we're aiming for by 2030 or even 2050 and beyond? Well, while no jurisdiction around the world has achieved true zero across all their different road user groups, we are seeing some great examples from around the world where when they have truly applied a safe system approach, they have seen major reductions in their trauma. And I'm going to highlight a couple of cities and examples. So this one is Helsinki. So Helsinki in Finland has adopted the Vision Zero principle quite a number of years ago, and they've been actively applying it in the true safe system fashion. And in 2019, we actually saw that in the city, there were no pedestrian-related fatalities in the city. And that's actually a significant achievement. That's only, one of a handful of cities around the world that has actually managed to achieve that. And the way they actually achieved that was not just focusing on telling people what to do, they actually looked at how to effectively manage the energy that was being created in the system. And they did that by looking at, okay, in the pedestrianised areas, by reducing speeds down to a level that they know if a pedestrian was to be hit, they're not going to be killed and they're not going to be injured. And they're not relying on people just to do the right thing. They're actively redesigning their streets and using infrastructure to physically slow people down. And understanding sometimes that humans are very incompatible with moving vehicles, they're actually redesigning their streets to make sure that there is a physical separation between our most vulnerable and the moving traffic that we're seeing on the streets. And they've seen obviously some significant results, and that is very encouraging for us. Another city is in Oslo, in Norway. They also saw 0 pedestrian deaths in 2019, and also no child under 16 years of age was actually killed in 2019 in the whole of the country. And also demonstrating that when we're protecting our most vulnerable on our road, we're actually going to achieve safety for everyone else in the system as well. And Norway is another country that has been actively applying the safe system approach with some significant results. And once again, they are also managing the energy that's being created in the system so that it's below the tolerance of where injuries will start to occur. And they're doing that by redesigning their street. They were thinking, okay, we're going to move pedestrians in this area, so we need to reduce the speeds to a level that is going to keep them safe. They prioritised pedestrian safety, reduced the speeds, and changed the road environment to make it very difficult for drivers to speed. So they installed roundabouts, they put in speed humps, and while the city of Oslo has the authority to just keep lowering the speed limits and, banning car use, they've decided it's not enough just to rely on people to do the right thing. They are prioritising actually implementing physical measures to help drivers do the right thing, to slow them down. So making the turning lanes a little bit tighter so drivers are forced to slow down. So these are two examples of cities that have truly embraced the safe system approach, and research has actually shown that if Norway actually didn't apply the safe system approach, they probably wouldn't see the reductions that they're seeing today. So these are just a couple of examples of if you apply the safe system in the right way, you will start to see results. So back to the question of whether the safe system is still a relevant concept today, and is it still a concept and philosophy that we should be using to guide our work in the lead up to 2030, I think it's extremely relevant still, only if we apply it in the right way though. And if we combine speed management infrastructure, vehicle safety measures, and then overlay the speed management on top of that, as well as encourage people to do the right thing, we can achieve a 95% reduction in trauma. I mean, these are significant savings in people's lives, injuries, as well as economic costs. So, but it has to be done in the right way. I mean, that's just the technical aspect of the safe system though. Is it enough just to have the technical know-how? Unfortunately, in this day and age, it's not enough. In order for us to see true implementation and adoption of the safe system, we also need political support, which is a very timely conversation as we are sitting in the room at the 4th Ministerial Conference. So political support is a really important element as we work towards 2030. If we want to continue to implement, if we want to continue to accelerate our efforts, we need to make sure our politicians, ministers, and the people working in government are on board. Because whether or not we are able to effectively implement the safe system depends on political will. It can make or break the strategies and the work that we're attempting to do. An example of this is in Wales, which I want to highlight. So going back to the crux of the safe system, it's all about managing energy. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to lower speed limits. And lowering speed limits, especially in areas that we know a lot of pedestrians will be walking around and vulnerable road users will be using. So in Wales, in September 2023, the government decided to lower their default speed limit from 30 miles per hour down to 20 miles per hour. And Wales isn't a big country, but there was significant political backlash from the community. So a lot of the community was not happy that the government actually reduced the default speed limits. And out of a population of about 3 million, about 500,000 actually wrote in letters to say, change the speed limit back, we don't want it. And to the government's credit, they investigated the claims, they looked at the roads and sort of looked at the evidence to say, well, should we be reverting these speed limits back to 30 miles per hour? But they followed the evidence, they followed what worked, and the government has decided no, the default 20 miles per hour will stay, because the evidence shows us that by doing that, we will save lives, we'll keep people safe, and we will be encouraging more active transport. So, and by actually following through with their commitment and following the evidence, Wales is already starting to reap some of the road safety benefits. So while it's still early days, but the preliminary data is actually showing us there's already been a 14% decrease in fatalities and 35% decrease in serious injuries since the time that the regulation has come into place on the roads that it's affected. And these safety benefits will only continue to accrue. But what can we learn from this experience in Wales? Is it easy to implement change? Not necessarily. Are you going to suffer some backlash from the community? Especially in the area of speed, you may. But in order to reap the benefits, you're going to have to stick through some of the backlash. You have to follow the evidence and be prepared that some people are not going to be happy about it. So Wales is a very good example of what can be achieved if you've got the political backing, if you've got the government following the evidence. And encouragingly, we're also seeing other countries follow suit. Ireland is actually looking at reducing their default speed limits on rural roads from 80 down to 60. But conversely, we're also starting to see governments renege on some of the speed limit changes that they're making, and we're starting to see an increase in the number of fatalities and injuries again. So this is all just to highlight, without the political will and without the political support, a lot of the evidence-based initiatives that we're trying to implement may be hampered. And that's why, when we're considering where the enablers and challenges are with the implementation of the safe system, we can't dismiss political will and political support and getting ministers on board with our initiatives. And I'm just about to finish, but I just want to introduce you to a friend of mine. So his name is Graham. Some of you may be familiar with him. I first met him in about 2014 when I was still working in Australia, and I was working for the organisation that came up with this idea. And Graham is an artist's impression of what the human body would need to look like if we are able to survive crashes at high speeds. You would essentially have to have no neck, because the neck is a very vulnerable part of the body, have an extremely big skull in order to be able to keep our brains safe in the event of a crash. And you can see he's got many airbags basically on the front of his chest that would inflate if he was to be hit. So I don't know anyone that looks like Graham. Maybe you do, hopefully not. But essentially, this is the type of body that we're designing our roads for in many parts of the world. We're designing our roads at speeds only Graham can survive. He's essentially the only person in the world that can survive speeds that most of our roads and countries are designing for. But once again, if we want to actually achieve zero and a 50% reduction by 2030, we're going to have to reimagine what those roads look like and understand who we're designing those roads for. It's not for Graham, it's for people like you and me. And the laws of physics are the same everywhere in the world. So the context and the principles of the safe system are applicable whether it's for a high-income country or a low-middle-income country. Our human bodies are essentially very similar, and the level of tolerance that we can actually tolerate is actually not that different. So I guess some key takeaways from my scene setting introduction is that I think the safe system approach and Vision Zero is still a very relevant and very effective way for us to be applying to our road safety work, but only if we apply it in a systems approach, not in isolation, not in silos, and not in a piecemeal fashion. It needs to be done in a holistic systems approach way. And we need the political support, we need the political backing. And politicians, ministers, they need to understand, follow the evidence, make the decision, but stick with it. They need to follow through and stick with it, and even when it gets difficult, continue to follow the evidence and bring the community along with you. It's difficult for the community to understand sometimes why we're making the changes and imposing all the changes on them, but if we explain to them exactly why, maybe it will be easier for us to be able to implement some of the changes that we're trying to see. And these principles are universally applicable, and we've got a lot of representatives from low middle income countries at this conference, but the universal laws of physics and the human tolerance levels are equally applicable in low middle income countries. And the solutions may need to be contextualized because that's slightly different, but in terms of the general principles, they're still very relevant for everyone. So I know Vero's got a lot of great questions to sort of continue the conversation, but I hope that gives you an idea and you'll be able to walk away from this panel today still thinking that the safe system is a good way for us to continue forward with our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess, for setting the scene and highlighting the significant opportunities of the safe system approach, providing it is correctly implemented. So welcome to you all. As you see, we are a small crowd, so you will have a chance to ask questions during the panel. So please be ready to intervene when you wish. But let me now turn to our panelists to see how you react to the great presentation of Jess. So Britta, you have been involved in many projects worldwide, including in many low and middle-income countries. So can you tell us about some success stories in the implementation of safe system in these countries, and what lessons can be learned for other countries?
Sure, of course, with pleasure. So my name is Britta Lang. I work for the Global Road Safety Partnership, and I've got colleagues of mine here in the audience who are working with me on the implementation of safe systems principles in low and middle income countries. And I want to touch on two activities that we focus on at the Global Road Safety Partnership under Bloomberg Philanthropies Initiative for Global Road Safety. So we are one of 10 delivery partners, and the role of GRSP in low and middle income countries, the so-called priority countries under that program, is to advocate and support NGOs and government agencies in those priority countries for better road safety legislation. And our other focus is we have a road policing team that is focused on supporting enforcement agencies in cities in those priority countries to improve their enforcement activities. Now, that sounds quite general, so we have 5 behavioral risk factors that our work is focused on, but I want to touch in particular on the role of speed in the safe systems approach. And I think this is also where GRSP's work come together. On the one hand, enforcement of speed isn't possible if there's not legislation in place that enables those enforcement agencies to enforce and to have penalties in place and demerit point systems in place that will actually make a contribution to changing behavior. So success stories, we've just been talking about what has been happening over the recent years. We had a fantastic achievement in Bangladesh where the government has, in 2024, has introduced speed limits for the first time, speed limits that are appropriate for different types of vehicles, and where local authorities also have the power to adjust those speed limits. These speed limits are currently in the process of implementation, and that will take a while, but that will then create the basis for enforcement activities as well in Bangladesh, for example, to make a contribution. I've also spoken to my colleague Martin Flieger, who's heading our road policing team in Africa, and he asked me to point out great progress in Ethiopia that is currently going on. We also have been doing work in Kampala in Uganda, where the government again has tightened up the legislation, thus laying the foundation for better enforcement activities as well. And of course, in everything that we do in the realm of enforcement, it needs to be data-driven. So just wanted to highlight the importance of data to really be able to implement evidence-based, intelligence-led policing strategies and activities. It's important to also do evaluation. So is it working? And I think Jess has made a wonderful example of saying how has the change in speed legislation in Wales, for example, impacted observed injuries and fatalities. So the evaluation activities need also always be part of our program. And maybe I'll stop here for now and hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Britta. Indeed, you highlight some key issues related to the safe system approach, including, of course, the role of speed management, which is at the core of the safe system, the importance of having the right legislation, and also the importance of having data to demonstrate that safe system approach works. I would like now to turn to Amy from Transport for London to understand how a city can successfully implement a safe system approach. London has a very comprehensive road safety strategy based on Vision Zero that you started to implement fully after the COVID-19 pandemic. So can you tell us about the main pillars of your strategy and the amazing impact it has had in a few years?
So I'm road safety strategy lead for... Yeah, thank you. So I'm Amy Pidwell, I'm road safety strategy lead for Transport for London. We're a city of about 9 million people, But in 2023, we had 95 people killed on the roads and 3,615 seriously injured. So to put that in context, Sweden is a country of about 10 million people. Obviously, they're dealing with a lot more rural roads and we're dealing with urban roads, but they saw 200 deaths in that time. So over the last decade, or kind of decade to 15 years, we've seen the number of people killed or seriously injured fall by just under a quarter. And better than that, we've seen the number of people killed on our roads fall by, sorry, is that better? Okay. The number of people killed on our roads has fallen by 30%. And that's against, if you look at the rest of Great Britain, they've seen the number of deaths fall by 7%. And if you look using URTAD's data, how we compare to other cities, so Oslo, Paris, New York City, we're up with the kind of the Scandies in terms of the number of deaths per kind of daytime population. So this kind of steady and sustained reduction in fatalities in London is really important, and it actually means that since 2015, about 250 people have gone home to their families who otherwise might have been killed in the last decade in London. So the way that we've done that is through partnership with the Metropolitan Police Service, who enforce on London's roads, with the 33 boroughs in London who run bits of our road network. We, as the Strategic Transport Authority, run 5% of London's roads. The other 95% are led by 33 local authorities with different political affiliations. So there's a lot of collaboration across organisational boundaries, across political affiliations. There's a lot of kind of coaxing, and it's a big collaborative network, and you've got to get everybody on board, which I'm sure will be very familiar to everyone in the audience too. But what that partnership is based on is the Vision Zero approach and the Safe System strategy. So we have a Vision Zero action plan for London. And we have activity that we're delivering across every single pillar of the Safe System. So in terms of lowering speeds, we've reduced the speeds on our kind of our TfL's own roads, where you have kind of major A roads where you have 1 or 2 lanes of traffic, possibly also a bus lane, but it's also a high street. You've maybe got people cycling down there, and you've got people walking everywhere because it's a major kind of thoroughfare for people walking as well as for cars. We've reduced the speeds on those sorts of roads to 20 miles an hour, so 30 kph. That's led to a 24% reduction in deaths and serious injuries on those roads. In terms of the streets pillar, safe streets, we've really promoted with those boroughs people and cycle priority streets, so as priority for people cycling and walking, restricting traffic access. Those are very low cost, talking about low and middle income country applicability, but they do require quite a lot of political capital because you are restricting people from where they most easily want to go. We've also got a Safer Junctions programme, which is looking at where the kind of the most deaths and serious injuries happen and come intervening there. And we're putting in cycle infrastructure, those kind of measures, and school streets to kind of reduce traffic around where children are going to school. In the safe vehicles pillar, we commission the bus services that run around London, and so we have a fleet of 10,000, and we have the bus safety standard, which includes the latest technology in terms of things like intelligent speed assistance, which means that buses can't accelerate faster than the prevailing speed limit. We've also implemented intelligent speed systems in our own car and van fleet that services things like engineering on the tube, and that has reduced speeding incidents in those vehicles by 65%. In terms of behaviours, we're obviously delivering enforcement, but also education. And I did just want to go back to the vehicles point to talk about safe system thinking. So what Jess was talking about was kind of like, how do you apply the safe system, and you've got to apply it right. How do you move from a kind of road safety way of thinking to a genuinely safe system Vision Zero way of thinking? So one example of that in London is we used to have a massive problem with trucks, and particularly trucks and cyclists. So where large trucks were killing cyclists or meaning that they lost limbs. What we used to do was this thing, which is a very road safety way of looking at it, which we'd taken a truck round and we'd invite cyclists in to sit in the truck. And we'd say, look, if you sit here, you can't see something that's directly in front of you. You're going to be careful now, aren't you, around a truck? You as a cyclist are not going to go near that vehicle again because you've noticed you can't see out. What we've moved to instead, which is a much more safe systems way of thinking about it, is something that we call the direct vision standard. And what that's about is taking new trucks and saying that any truck that enters London now has to either have a low enough window that you can see out of the vehicle to someone who is standing directly in front of it, or a system of mirrors and cameras retrofitted to something that doesn't do that, that means that you can, that you still get the same visibility. And that means that since we've implemented that, the number of people killed in a collision with a truck has fallen from about 16 every year to 8 every year. So we've halved the number of people killed by trucks. And we still do the taking the trucks around saying, look, it's very difficult to see out of it. But that's only one part of that bigger, safer system piece. And the most impactful thing that you can do is to tackle the source of harm where you see it. But anyway, so there's more to do. We still have 95 people killed, 3,650 seriously injured. We're not done yet. But there's good things that we can do that are impactful.
Thank you so much, Amy, and it's really impressive what London has been able to achieve in just a few years. And it's also very interesting to say that you implemented some low-cost measures with very impactful impact, and maybe we can discuss later about which of these measures can be easily imported in low and middle-income countries. Professor Wong, so you are from Malaysia, where motorcycles represent a dominant modes of transport. So how can you adopt a safe system approach when you have such a big share of your fleet composed of motorcycles?
Thank you. Thanks for throwing these interesting questions. Inevitably, motorcycle is the most dangerous mode of transport. No matter what we do, it is still the most dangerous mode, even more dangerous than the bicycling, because the speed you can acquire a lot more higher than cycling. So we shouldn't look, of course, safe system approach, it is not just for road safety. In fact, it is a solution for safety in every aspect, including occupational safety as well. It is very important for us to understand that in the crash, what had happened, which is my area, I'm a mechanical engineer, this is how the crash, how the energy came done. But not to make people boring, but you see, as in general, we engineer design things, we have a consideration, as you rightfully mentioned, about how we can see what we can't see. Our physical world gives us that constraint. We have to work on it. Engineers try to come up with a solution, which you have pointed out as well. But this has to come together with a proper use, good use. I take example from motorcycles. First of all, motorcycle never been designed for any one of us to use it for long hour, long distance travel every day. It's never been. So please don't misuse it. Another example, as we know, the road had been designed with such a speed limit, not because somebody dreamed last night, the chief engineers, the people, I like 80. 80 is my number, I put it there. No, it is for safety. And that's engineers' works, how we do things. And when you go beyond that limit, I have to say sorry. When we put 80 there, you go to 180, and you end up problem, you cannot blame me. Because I designed that for 80 only. Anything beyond that, I never even think about it. So for motorcycle as well, we have to understand that, first of all, it is the most dangerous mode of transport. Speed is definitely very, very critical, because the only thing can protect the motorcyclist is basically now, if you wear a standard or proper helmet, you wear it properly. If you don't wear the helmet, I think you know what it is. Because we human, the maximum speed we can do is by running. How fast can we run? If we run, we survive. Most of the time, if you run properly, quote unquote, you will not fall. But if you fell down, you still, a lot of time, we are okay. But that's the speed we're talking about. Our skull would protect us, but not with higher speed. Our body never designed for that. But we are greedy. We want higher speed, and we are human. That is what we do. That's what we're good in doing. In that perspective, we end up having safety concerns, challenge, risk. And system has to be there to protect us. The vehicle we use the road we use, and then how we use it, all is one system. We cannot rely on just individual talking about this driver or this car motorcycle manufacturers or the road engineers not designing properly, but it all must come as a system. While we're talking about motorcyclists, the helmet is very important, yes, but how it being used on the road, again, we do not wish anybody of us, including using car, trucks, etc., to go beyond the engineering consideration or engineering design. Using a truck to carry a rocket. Okay, I take extreme example. So more important thing for us to also understand, when we talk about a system, we should not look into as a silo, which not the system approach we talk about, right? So on the road, we have a mix of traffics. To be fair, in Malaysia, we have about now 34 million population. We have more than 34 and 35 plus now, probably 36 million of registered vehicle on the road. Of course, that including motorcycles and cars. And if you ask me, the worst situation probably would be like us, we have about half-half. Of course, now new car, the number of new car registered is higher than the motorbike now, but with the history we coming in, is now we're talking about half-half. So that is the worst. If you have 95% of your traffic with motorcycle only, it's very different compared to also like 5%, probably like in Europe. But when we have half-half, then these two mix up, and that creates a lot more problem, which we are facing. So, we as a system as well, we would like to look into also, we used to believe a myth. We end up not very true. When we get better in terms of our income, we would leave the bike or the motorbike, and we go for the car. Unfortunately for my generation, a lot of my friends whom I know can afford a car, not only one, not probably two. My neighbors have 5 cars. Two drivers, the son goes somewhere, studies, they got 5 cars. But we still want motorbike. We still want. Why? Because that, even myself, I used to ride motorbike, but now I don't riding any bike anymore. But I think back, even me. The good thing about bike is what? You feel the speed. Why? I'm also a human. So what can we do to that? First thing first, I believe, make good use of the vehicle for the proper use. If we have options, we try to eliminate if we can. Eliminate meaning say, if you have a choice, don't use bike. Because that is the most dangerous mode of transport. Of course, there could be some motorcycle manufacturers here may not feel happy about what I try to say. That's what we call eliminate. If you never ride a bike, you never get killed on the bike. Eliminate. Sometimes we can't because we have constraints, we have challenges. We must use the bike. Say, we put aside that. If we can, we call motor shift. We can move the motorcyclist, which is on the most dangerous mode of transport, to the safest mode, for example, the public transport, the tubes, the underground, the MRT, LRT. And in Malaysia, we have 0 fatalities for our MRT, LRT, and the rail. We have collision before. I was one of the investigation team there. But until today, so many years past, I think more than 2 decades now, 0 fatalities. And for motorcycles with that high fatalities, so dangerous, if we successfully move some of them to public transport, that's a big win. That's a big win. So of course, we can't build the LRT within a day or a week. Yes, we need time, we need patience. But that should be the direction we try to motor shift, we eliminate. If we can't, can we reduce the risk, i.e. the frequency of get killed or the severity of if you end up a crash. So now, what can we do? Of course, reduce. One of the easiest things is the speed. A lot of people say, I'm an ordinary human. I'm not the expert. I'm not a professional rider. Okay? You can't expect me to be a so-called professional rider because that's not my forte, for example. I need to use a bike to go to work, for example. So, but the minimum you can do, which is very effective, reduce speed. In Kuala Lumpur, in the city, we have issues about that. About half of them riding bike, they are over the speed. And then they killed by lose control, as well as gliding among the motorcycles. Why? Because even though the helmet we have, do you know that what is the crash speed in the lab to approve as a UN regulation 22 helmet? Is it 100 kilometers per hour? No. What is that? Is it 50? Not even 50. 30 plus only. That means if you go beyond 30 with motorcycle, with whatever you have here, yes, by engineering consideration, design, you would be okay if you're less than that. If you go beyond reach 50, then we have to say, sorry, that's you decided. Because we never asked or to do a more robust helmet which carry more weight and up more risk for other things. We should know that. So I'm trying to say is that as a system approach is very, very important, very, very critical. We hope that everybody can embrace it. And we shouldn't look at only, of course, rider behavior, road user behavior is important element, but it is not and it cannot be the only factor we look about. So please, we have a lot more opportunity beyond the road users. As a system, we can do a lot more to save more lives. And I would like everybody here to can take home this as an important message. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sho. And indeed, it's important to realize what you can do in the short term and the emergency of taking these measures, while at the same time having a long-term approach and definitely model shift towards the most safest modes is definitely the path to go. Sumaya, you are heading the road safety strategy in Abu Dhabi, where the number of road deaths has more than halved in the past 10 years. So can you tell us about the key ingredients of the success in Abu Dhabi, and how about your new forthcoming safe system strategy?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you guys for being here as well. Abu Dhabi adopt safe system, and within the safe system we have 5 safety pillars that we are having and creating an ambitious action plan to implement this. But let me go first for the past 15 years, as we are meeting a first decade of action by reducing the fatalities 50%. Actually, we did a great strategy within the federal, and the Ministry of Interior was covering all the safety aspects that's been demonstrating engineering, enforcement, education, and even the smart technologies. Based on what they are doing past 15 years, we already reduced the fatalities by more than 50%. I want to add a very important things that happening in United Arab Emirates. In United Arab Emirates, we are not only one entity who is covering the safety, no. We have a federal safety council who is gathering all 7 emirates to have same regulations, same policies, and sometimes whatever have been implemented with the other emirates, it could be as a benchmark for the others. Especially in Abu Dhabi, as a local, we have a safety committee which covering Abu Dhabi Police, Ministry, Department of Health, and Transport Department. So all of these entities are sitting in one table, taking a decision for what have been done about any safety issues happening within our network. These collaborations are happening between the local entities and federal entities, helping us and to accelerate our safety visions. But we are not stopping on only just a local or federal. We are collaborating with the private sectors and even with the global organization to exchange and to have more best practice and benchmark within the safety strategies. And this is actually what happened with us in 2019. After we adopting a previous safety strategy, we are transferring to a safe system and safety pillars. I would like to thank our panelists, Jessica and the others, Britta, who is helping us actually to demonstrate and supporting us for our Vision Zero 2040. So we put an ambitious goal for Abu Dhabi to reach zero vision by 2040. In order to move to this stage, we are creating a 5-year action plan. This action plan actually have 2 main pillars. One pillar for the infrastructure. We are highlighting the most critical high-risk intersection and most critical high-risk for pedestrians area. And we are looking also for the road length, the road safety barriers. This is all about the infrastructure, and we are preparing like a great project covering all these projects. Then we go for the capacity building, and capacity building, based on the capacity building, we are doing like a training course for our engineers related to the road safety audit, roadside design manuals, updating all policies, putting more enforcement, reviewing all the strategies, since that we have, you know, a mode of transport are changing. As the Prof mentioned about the motorcycle, even in Abu Dhabi and United Arab Emirates, and I think it's a global issue. We have a delivery motorcycle now happening within our road transport. And we are creating a new manuals for them to cover and to tackle those issues. Based on what we are doing, we notice that our fatalities are decreasing based on what the dedicated lane that we already bought for them. We are putting some regulations. We make sure that the safety of the BBEs that are within their requirements, and we are trying to bring them on board with us to play this role as well. We are participating with them and listen, guys, you are the one who's creating the issue. You need to fix the issue with us. We will not work one entities. So the private sectors from those motorcycles companies are even collaborating with us to make sure that the safety is for everyone. And we are converting this message. Safety is a shared responsibility. It's not one entity's work. When we work together, we will achieve more feasible and tangible result for saving lives.
Thank you very much, Sumaya. And I think it was very important that you mentioned the role of coordination with many, many stakeholders, and congratulations for the achievements so far. James, so you are the technical director of IRAP, the International Road Assessment Program. You are working in many low and middle-income countries where you are really pushing for a proactive approach to road safety. So can you explain a little bit how data, in particular, can help you in having this proactive approach to road safety?
Yes, certainly. So historically, a lot of what we've done as road safety around the world has been reactive. We've said where have the people died, and then we've responded to that. And so we've been very, very reactive. Now, if we put this in the context of, say, we inherited a nice hotel that had lots of balconies, but none of the balconies actually had any guardrails on them. How would we do it? Would we open up that hotel and we say, well, we're going to wait till somebody falls off before we're actually going to put a balcony in? We'll only fix the balconies where people fall off of them and the rails aren't there. No, we wouldn't do that approach. We'd say, well, actually, we need to protect all of our guests. We'll put a rail around all of those balconies. But of course, that's going to take time. We can't do that, and that's going to take money. So this is where we've got to be proactive, and actually we've got to blend proactive and reactive together. So yes, where we do get clusters of people falling off, we say, well, yeah, that's where there's a pattern happening. But also what we say is, well, where do most people book their rooms? Which are the most frequented floors? Well, we start on that floor. Which are the floors that are most dangerous, like the top floor? Okay, well, we'll start protecting that. So we actually go for a coordinated approach and get it there and be systematic. And we can only do that by measuring where those risks are and then responding to them in a coordinated way. And I think this is where the safe system really comes into it. At its heart, as Jessica was saying, it's very, very simple. It's just about energy. And I think where the complexity comes in is about how do we prioritise and how do we actually set our agenda to do that. And I think the only way we can do that is by something like backcasting, where we say, where do we want to be? Vision 0. What are the mechanisms we need to do to achieve that? And of course, there's multiple mechanisms. There's post-crash care, there's bringing down the speed. But of course, there's also and improving the vehicles and the infrastructure. But of course, we can't do that all in one day. So what we say is, almost what the Dutch have been saying is, what's our ultimate design of our roads going to be, and how can we incrementally get to that? So we know that we want, on high-speed roads, safe roadsides. We want wide lanes. We want shoulders. But you're not going to do that all on day one. So how do you actually start putting things in place so that it starts building up to that point? And then likewise, in your urban areas, how do we get to that point? The other one also really to think of is how the pillars interact with each other. So it's all well and good going, I've done my job, it's a safe road, I've put a 20-mile-an-hour sign up there. But actually, unless it's enforced and obeyed, it's absolutely no use. And so this is where you look at the different ones and you think, well, the speed pillar, actually that can be really, really, really well enforced. Firstly by education, so you tell people about it, but also by the infrastructure. So this is where things like self-explaining roads come in. If you make your road look like a racetrack, people are going to drive on it fast like a racetrack. And so concepts like place and motion, where you're going, well, actually what's happening in this area? This is a place for people, it's there where their homes are. That's where you've got to pull the speeds down, and you've also got to reinforce that with all the characteristics of the roads so that people know that that's how they're supposed to behave. Whereas out on those high-speed roads where you're just going from A to B, you do the equivalent, but also you put the extra level of protection in there, so that if there are people in and around those areas, they're actually being segregated from the road.
Thank you very much, James. And clearly you mentioned the importance of having also data to demonstrate what can be done. We are now going to enter into panel discussion. If you have questions, we are ready to already. Okay. So are you happy that we take questions now? Okay. So can you please raise your hand? So the gentleman on the first row here, you need my mic. If you can please just say your name and where you're from.
So I'm Anwar Makarimov from Uzbekistan. I represent UNOPS, UN agency. So my question is here probably to persons who represent cities exactly. So my question is, what do you think is the role of arterial roads in cities? So yes, we are talking about lowering speed. We need 30 kilometers per hour, but same time we need also roads which should serve all people who lives here. So do you think everywhere we need to have 30 kilometers per hour? It's my question. Thank you.
Okay, so obviously this is a question for you, Amy, and
Thank you very much. I think it's a really good question, and it's quite difficult when you're coming into a city that's already been built and then saying, how does this work? I think there's a combination of things. So as James was saying about use and motion, so you still need to be able to get freight into cities because freight is what keeps cities living. But if you've got lots of people walking or living or kind of congregating using shops on those roads as well, I think that's when you say we really need to drop the speed. And so as far as possible, kind of the major freight movements should be happening outside your city centres where people are using them for walking and cycling denses. But when you can't pull them out, you either, well, you do a combination of slowing the traffic right down to what's survivable, and you also think about, you could be bolder, like we haven't done this yet, but you can also say, what time do we want freight coming in? So if you've got major heavy freight that needs to come through, does it need to be there at the peak times when people are walking and cycling, or can you time it so it's outside the peak so there's less of a conflict risk? But yeah, anywhere where you've got kind of people walking or cycling and using that space to kind of cross the road, that's where you want to really make that a kind of a person-friendly, like people-friendly streets rather than a vehicle-friendly street, I'd say. Yeah. Do you want to say anything from...
Joe, do you want to say something?
Probably a quick response to complement further. I think it's never be a very simple solution. I believe we all agree upon that. In our capital cities and also our major cities in Malaysia, also we have a lot of flyovers, the multi-layer highways crossing the cities, and also that the purpose. You see, when we talking about that, is to solve the traffic problem. We want to have people able to move in, the traffic, able to move in and out of the cities. I think the bigger challenge comes is that we all understand that when we are moving very slow, we are safe. We have a traffic jam, nothing move, nothing collide to each other. Very simple analogy, right? But we cannot afford to have nothing move because we want to have things moving. So that's the balance we need to strike, first of all. The challenging things come in, for example, in our city is that, yes, we have multi-lanes, so-called highways flying into the city, even cross the city as well. The problem is that during the peak hours, even the normal, so-called the normal hours, they are all okay because of slow moving, double slow, very. The problem comes when it is during the wee hour of peak, very wide lane, not many cars, then you will automatically speed up. So I think this is the challenge that we have. In Malaysia, we have a cabinet committee looking into traffic congestion and road safety because a balance has to be right. And that's the challenge. Thank you.
And sorry, just one more point, which is to say, I think our jobs as officials is to give the politicians the range of options that they can take. And so I would say, don't be afraid to be bold. If you look at Paris, for example, what they've done on the banks of the Seine is they had an enormous arterial road, and they've just taken it out. And now it's just for walking and cycling instead, because they've said that our city centre is for people, not for the movement of vehicles. And so there are kind of those bigger, bolder things to do too.
It was not easy, I can tell you. Rita, is there anything you wanted to add here?
No, I completely agree with the points that have already been made. I think traditionally we have been very much focused on the motorized vehicle and giving it priority. And I think maybe this is a point that I would like to add. We need to make sure that all the bold moves are associated with persuasive communication that takes the population with us and makes them understand that from a quality of life, healthy mobility point of view, they're getting a better system that is safer, that is protecting them as vulnerable humans, and is bringing a lot of health benefits that are worthwhile putting in place. And I think so. It's a real paradigm shift that needs to be supported by persuasive communication. And I think this is another point that I wanted to make, sort of at conferences like this, at events like this. Of course, we are always together with all the people who also subscribe to the concept of healthy mobility. Of course, we all agree in here that we want to make it safe. We want to make, the traffic still work, the transport of freight still work. But this is a bit of an echo chamber, and we need to make sure that we also speak to the people, to the difficult side of implementing bold ideas, and that we take them with us and get that shift, that paradigm shift in their heads as well. Thank you.
This is very important. And indeed, here we have a very easy public, and it's easy to talk to you. I think there were some other questions, yes? So there is one here and one in the middle.
Thank you so much.
Maybe we'll take two questions in a row. So this gentleman and then the gentleman a bit further.
I'm Aubrey Nyanga from Malawi Roads Authority. My question is going to Amy, I believe, and Samia, and any other that might be able to respond to the question. It's a bit long. I wanted to know on what measures one can apply in terms of applying the SAFE system in a setup whereby you have got different entities or organizations that are undertaking the road construction. For instance, in Malawi, we have the Roads Authority. We are responsible for the main roads, and we make sure that the main roads comply to the SAFE system approach. We are trying to make sure to. But then we have the district councils and the city councils that maybe they don't have the capacity to implement the SAFE systems approach, and then the area of focus in which they are focused as well, there are also different areas of focus. And maybe they don't have the technical know-how as well as the levels of understanding of the SAFE system. Maybe they are not to that power level, and you have different priorities altogether. How can you go about that, as well as even the police that are responsible, let's say, for the enforcement of the speed restrictions that are there? They also have their own priorities as well as their own areas of focus. How can you go about it to implement this SAFE system approach so that all the other key players are also involved? Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, I would like, I think, to meet the professor to ask a few things. Thank you.
Well, maybe by the time you go there, Sumaya, would you like to say a word about how
Yes,
Abu
sure.
Dhabi coordinates with the different agencies you have in your Emirates?
Yes, sure. Indeed, I believe, and this is what I noticed while we are working with our stakeholders, to have a committee within one table from all entities responsible about the safety and the road. This is very, very important, and this is what lead you to achieve your vision. For example, now when you are, give us an example about the speed limits and the radars. Actually, our colleague who's here today with us from UAE delegation, Abu Dhabi Police, are with us within the safety committee, and they are we are working together. For example, if there is a new road which been implemented by us, we are coordinating with them about the speed radars, and they are this collaboration between the entities helping us to reduce the fatalities and to reach to our vision. And sometimes they are the one who is telling us, for example, there is an issue here. We have to do a road safety audit, or we have to put some radars or some safety measures for such allocations. But this is very important, to bring people on board in one table for all the meetings related to the safety issues. This is what's gonna support you and help you to achieve the safe system. Thank you.
Amy, maybe you would like also to bring your experience, because you mentioned that TfL only managed 5% of the roads in London, so this means that you need to work with the other agencies which maintain the 95% of roads.
It's really difficult, and I do appreciate the challenge that you've got. I think it's interesting if you can. Depends what your setup is, whether or not there's a lead agency. We are essentially the lead agency. And so then that means that you can work with boroughs that have less capacity. And so data is key, knowing where you think that there are issues. And so you can kind of say, okay, we think there's a problem there, and you can go and talk to the right people. But also, what's your kind of information source? Are you bringing people together like once a year, so jobs change and everything, to give them a reminder of what the safe system looks like? Are you saying, let's remember what the kind of best practice is? Are you fostering a kind of best practice network between those authorities so they can learn from each other rather than everyone coming in having to learn from first principles? It is extremely challenging, but that kind of like the governance piece about like how do you get people together, and are you kind of bringing them together on a regular basis to give them the information that you want them to have, and then help them with like, this is what it looks like, so they can go out and kind of see best practice done by their peers. That can be quite effective. And the only other thing that we've had that's most effective in terms of speed limits being such a kind of politically contentious issue, a lot of our outer London boroughs haven't brought their urban speed limits down as far as we'd like them to. So then you're in a position of saying, okay, we've got 12 or so authorities where we think they could go further. Who do we think is most likely to move in the next 2 years? So who do we think where there's a bit of political will, there's the kind of capacity within the organisation, let's get our kind of like most persuasive bods out there to kind of really kind of love bomb them into thinking, yeah, lower speeds, that's a thing that we can do. And then the last point is like the easiest thing to do with any of this is if you can ring fence some funding and say, for this sort of measure, this money is available. That obviously is a very, very effective lever.
Thank you. There is a question here. Excuse me, please.
Yes, so certainly within this, I think there's also a really big role for KPIs in there. So, for example, with the star rating for roads, star rating for vehicles, saying actually what are we targeting? Because ultimately, yes, there's a good synergy there between, or alliance there between safe system infrastructure being 5-star, but knowing that you can't necessarily get that all in one day, but actually giving them a target and saying we want this much of your travel to be on this level of star rating, that's actually that much more achievable and something that they can then control and move. And you can slowly over time up that level. You can say, well, you've got 90% of your travel on 3-star or better. Well, maybe you need 40% on 4-star as well as 95% on 3-star or above. The nice thing about this also with KPIs is then when the ones that you're loving the most and you're getting to encourage, they start performing well, their neighbours start to get embarrassed. And their neighbours start going, oh, our numbers aren't looking as good. We need to start improving that. And suddenly, it's rather than being raced to the bottom, it's actually encouraging everybody to perform well.
Yes, there is a very good sign of positive emulation with different agencies. So, yes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tije Goris. I'm with Delft Road Safety Courses. We've been teaching the Safe Systems approach since 2012. And I'm glad this question was burning for a couple of minutes already. So thanks, Rita, for shifting the conversation to effective communication. Because I don't need to explain that humans are vulnerable, as we just learned from the professor. We love speed. But humans are also lazy, and we develop habits. And I think this might be the explanation for the pushback that we are experiencing outside this bubble. So I think it's really, so we are mentioning examples, collaboration, political champions. We do a bit of communication, but it's quite difficult. So I was wondering if we could continue perhaps identifying these great examples that could be useful for all of us. The arguments that were used to convince your counterpart in the engineering department, or how to manage the citizens' pushback as explained in your examples, Jess, I believe. So if there could be, well, 1 or 2 panelists that could provide this example, also the mirrors in London, for example, that must have been quite a challenge to persuade these people. So if there's this little anecdotes that could be in there, because they are mostly hidden in the process, but it's so valuable for these people, for all of us, to set this next step. So thanks for some further explanations of this.
Thank you, and I'm sure our panelists have some nice histories. Jess, do you have an example to share?
I'll comment. So just following that picture of Graham that I showed as a part of my presentation, I was previously working at the Transport Accident Commission in Melbourne, Australia. So as a part of the TAC's remit, they did a lot of public education campaigns, and that's about engaging with the community on key road safety issues. And when we decided to embark on Vision Zero and the safe system approach in Victoria, we did a lot of research with the community to sort of understand where they were at with understanding what Vision Zero really meant. And a lot of the information that we got back through the research was that the community didn't understand why we were imposing all these changes on them. Why are you lowering the speed limits down to 30 kilometres, or why are you reducing the speed? Why are you spending so much money on infrastructure in these parts of the system? And what they wanted to know was, well, communicate with us. Tell us why you are making these changes and tell us what the benefits are. If you tell me why you're lowering the speed limit and it's to save lives, we're more likely to comply. So communication is key, and when you are implementing a lot of these very significant changes, going back to what I was talking about, is bring the community along with you. Don't just impose the changes on them, tell them exactly why the changes are being made, and as the system evolves, evolve the conversation with them. And so the TAC actually started a series of campaigns to educate the community and tell them, well, this is the system that we're aiming for, and that's why we're putting up barriers on the roads. And this is what happens if we do have barriers. It can save lives. We're making these changes to the vehicles, we're lowering speed limits. And that's why Graham came about. It's to help them understand we're not built like Graham, and that's why we need to change the system in order to protect us all. So I think there was a very important lesson from the Victorian experience is you need to bring the community along with you, which in turn softens the political support. So if the community wants it, you're more likely to get that political support from the ministers because there's less pushback, which means it's easier for them to follow through with any commitments that they've made.
Thank you. James?
See, I wonder the slide you had at the beginning where you have the humans are fallible and humans are fragile, whether we need to put another one in there and say, like, humans are selfish. And it's only when we can get past that potentially we can change it. And so, yeah, if you do a survey of drivers, what you find out is generally about 80% of drivers are above average driving standard. And yeah, because I'm a good driver, it's not going to happen to me. So what we've got to do is that communicating it to explain to the public what does it actually mean to them, and why are we doing these things, and how is that going to help them? And it's like with the direction of the vehicles, is until you get like an NCAP star rating, that none of the manufacturers recognise that the importance of it. But as soon as you've got something like Renault and go, actually, we can use this as a marketing ploy, then it becomes selfish because it's like, I'm going to look after my family because I'm going to get a safe car. We've got to look at the tactics for everything else and go, okay, what's that same thing? It's like, even with motorbikes, ultimately the session you were in before, and looking at the research coming out and going, well, why do people want to ride motorbikes? Ultimately, it comes down to selfish reasons. It's speed, it's cheaper, and it's convenience. And it's like, well, actually, how do we break those down? Do we provide more like BRT, but make it cheaper, make it much more available and easier for people so they can still get to that destination quickly?
Thank you, James. Britta, you also have some experience to share.
Yes, I wanted to touch on the experience in our enforcement team at GRSP, where we are very much trying to strengthen capacity in enforcement agencies in our priority cities. And I think one of the themes that always comes back to us is the point of it's all about relationship building. And relationship building takes time. So you might have the evidence at your fingertips about what's right, and you have the evaluation studies, but there is the human component of those you're excuse me, talking to, being willing to listen and trusting your judgment. And that takes time, and that sometimes takes playing the broken record for a couple of years, as also decision makers might change. There's very often changes in government, in the directors of departments and whatnot, and you just have to keep at it. So there's an element of stubbornness that is required from a good road safety campaigner, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. I see there are 2 questions here, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. My name is Ahmed Shilbaya from the NADA Foundation for Safer Egyptian Roads, a civil society organization. I've benefited a lot from hearing about the safe system approach, and as much as it sounds simple and common sense for everybody to execute upon. However, it does entail big political capital, as many of you mentioned, as well as financial capital as well, I mean, changing the infrastructure. Given that most of the burden now is in low and middle income countries, and I really appreciate the examples that you all provided. Unfortunately, most of them are in upper income countries. I'm trying to understand how can we implement the safe system approach and the examples that you mentioned in low and middle income countries, especially that also there is a big portion of the transportation is informal, TikToks and others that are outside of the system. And also question also in upper income countries, is there sort of an inequity in terms of the safe system approach between rural and urban? And then the last, weaving in another part of the question is, are we also falling hostage towards talking about the roads rather than going upstream more towards designing of cities and instead of correcting the system? Thank you.
So, Amy, you would like to respond because you mentioned earlier that even in London you can apply low-cost measures with important results.
So I think the point that you make about city design is absolutely on the money. I think it's really, really important because if we're looking at kind of what the kind of most effective and lowest cost measures that you can make are, the unspoken sixth pillar that you might put into the safe system is this point about modal shift. So getting people into the most efficient and safest ways to move people around a city. And I'm sorry, I'm only going to talk about cities, can't talk about rural. So if you can get people out of private cars and off motorbikes and into buses or onto foot and on cycles, then that's a lot of the safety goal one. And some of the cheapest measures that you can take are about that making people's streets. So streets where people are walking and cycling and not doing anything faster or more or heavier than that. And you don't need much cost to do that at all. You just need a couple of planters at the top of the road. And that can be really, really cheap to do. It's the political capital that you need to make sure that works. But what traffic do we actually want in our city centres when you've got lots of people moving around on foot? Like, that's a kind of big political question, but it doesn't need to be an expensive question to answer. And the other one is like looking at speeds. So James will probably tell me off for this because he is from IRAP and is talking about actually like properly designed road networks. But if you're trying to get speeds down to 30 kph, 20 miles an hour, then a lot of the ways that you can do that can be quite cheap. If you're just narrowing the road, then that forces people through, and that doesn't take much kind of infrastructure or kind of gold plating. You can do that with a couple of like just large concrete blocks in like repeated across the road, and then that doesn't need to be expensive, but it can be very effective.
Joe?
Yeah. Can I just quickly come back on that? 100% agree with you. Yeah, no, so you just have to look at a lot of the design guide manuals and go, actually, things like road diets are so powerful. And that's where we start moving away from being car-centric and say, no, this piece in the middle of between houses that we call a road, that's for mobility.
Thank you. I just would like to compliment further about what we have been discussing. Of course, my country is not really a high-income country. Of course, we hope, we wish. I'm lucky or unlucky in a way that I've gone through phases, things change. During my time as I studied in secondary schools, I cycle to school. Whole family can afford one car, but not more than one car. That means that is the car, no motorbike. When I reach an age whereby I can ride a bike, I can feel the burden of the family by giving me one second-hand motorbike. So that was my time. When we get better, we progress more as a country. Buying a motorbike is something very, very easy or very affordable, and the bank is always be ready there to give you whatever special loan, etc. Now, challenge comes in as what we have discussed over here. When as a developing country or even underdeveloped country, if you look at, I would suggest that we should look at the positive side. A lot of things you can start with the right footage. For example, how we planned. You see, why would I need to move that far to go to school if I have a choice to do it closer? I can walk, I can cycle. So, of course, nowadays we have parents saying that even cycle, I don't want to see my kids, cycling with a sweat, etc. I want to give him a motorbike even though underage. We have such parents. Why? Because we progress. Now, in the process of progressing, can we, of course, a lot of policymakers here, can we have a better directions, prevent whatever we have gone through, which is probably a bit bad? We end up, people want to use motorbike is because where you stay is too far away from the school. Can we make a change? Of course, now in Malaysia, we are starting to do that. You won't get into a school whereby you are out of 5 kilometers, which is good. Of course. Why? Wasting time on the road is something definitely we shouldn't get into. It's non-productive, very dangerous. So that's where I think for so-called the developing country, I believe that could be a good way. But to answer also to our Malawi's good friends, I believe, for road safety, safe system, similar to the questions, safe system approach have challenge. Why? Because it covers everybody. When we covers everybody, it's so difficult to get everyone on the same phase. And because we know there are changes here and there, I think we mentioned that, ministers change, administrator change. And I would like to suggest that please do make good use of, I think James has mentioned that as well, make good use of engineering tools and approach. When we, as engineer, of course, I'm not asking or selling engineering program, whatever. But I'm trying to say is that we already established some of those more systematic approach in a way, which is part of system approach as well, that we have technical guidelines, well written, with supporting evidence behind, and then how we can make use of it by getting the evidence, pushing together, and we can convince that process to be getting through. Because the guideline to be changed, it is not because of some change of the Director General that will change, or change of the ministers that will change. So that would be a good tool that we should always use to communicate. And of course, it is, I would like to preach in the way that please do give all of us, each other, some positive energy. Why? Because throughout my career, my experience, a lot of time we only face negative energy.
Thank you, Shaw.
Yeah, please.
We have one or two last questions, so this gentleman.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Sorry, it looks like that I'm in between of the break, but standing. But I will be very short in the question. First of all, thank you very much. It's so pity in such an event when you want to have a clone of yourself to be able to participate in different sessions at one time. So I missed the first part, but nevertheless, I want to ask this question. Probably you already touched this. What we are feeling, I represent the National Road Safety Council of Armenia. My name is Pavel Shahinyan. I know some of you. The problem that we are facing, and I think this is very much related to the safe system approach as well, as we all agree that people are selfish, as we are people, so we are selfish in everything, I think. We all agree with this. And I think that everyone dealing is also selfish. I mean, the car manufacturer, the road designers, so everything goes there. But nevertheless, don't you think that the vehicle manufacturing is so much up front of the development that we do not catch up with our road designs and with our thinking even. We lately are facing, if before the new technologies in vehicles like automated braking system was available in the luxury cars, it was so expensive. Now it's available in very cheap cars as well. And we have kind of a clash of civilization, especially in the developing or underdeveloping countries, low-income countries, where you have a huge fleet of old cars, even without ABS system, and having new cars coming because they're cheap. And when this automatic braking system, and I was, by the way, witnessing just yesterday in front of the hotel, when the braking system just braked the car, and the old car, a taxi, was not able to brake because they don't keep the distance. So my question would be, we all agreed with the SDG goals that the world has to pass like 70% of roads should be the 3-star road. And on my mind that we are kind of a back here, we do not manage, because for the governments to make the changes in the road designs takes years to make the legislative change, whereas the car market is developing so fast, like every 6 months you have something new. And here I see some problem, and so my question would be, what do you think about this? Have you witnessed this in other countries as well, or in your countries? And what about the AI inclusion into the design process?
Thank you, Jess. I think this is a question for you. Coming from Global NCAP, you are seeing the many development in different countries.
Yeah, I do think, yeah, there are a lot of new technologies coming out on the market, or what we perceive to be new technologies. Where we talk about autonomous emergency braking, it's actually a technology that's been around for 20 years. So what we think is new has actually been around for a long time, and it's taken that long to actually, even in high-income countries, to get these technologies through the market. And one of the key reasons why is because either there's no new car assessment program in the region to push for these technologies, or governments are not implementing the regulation to ensure that every car coming into the market in your country actually has this technology. So, and I absolutely agree there, you know, from a systems approach, we want to ensure that there is interaction between the roads and the cars. We need roads that cars can read, because once again, there's an interactive effect. So for like autonomous emergency braking, if the speed limits are set too high, the technology don't work in certain conditions. So I do think that while there are a lot of advances in vehicle safety, we can't forget the solutions that we have today. So autonomous emergency braking is still lacking in most of the countries that we're working in, especially in low middle income countries. Not even talking about autonomous vehicles or AI or any further developments, just with the solutions we have today, we still need to further deploy them and further push them. And I think to the gentleman's previous question around, you know, is the safe system approach actually relevant for low middle income countries? While most of the examples that we have touched on are more high income country based, and I think that's partly due to more high income countries having applied safe system more systematically, the lessons can still be applied. And obviously funding, capital, all that is always going to be an issue, even in high income countries. But we can start small. I mean, just in the vehicle space, in a country where there's not a lot of funding for vehicles, governments can still introduce a regulation to ensure that manufacturers that are supplying cars actually do so in a safe way. A lot of countries are building new roads. Let's not start with retrofitting every road with new technologies and new infrastructure. Let's start with the new roads that we're building and ensuring that they're up to standards. So we have to start somewhere. So, you know, we can't throw all the money that we have into it right at the start, but let's start somewhere. Otherwise, we're never going to get there.
Thank you, Jess. Well, I'm afraid it's time to wrap up the session. It has been a very rich discussion. Thank you very much for your interest and your questions. What we heard today is that clearly the safe system approach works, providing it is properly implemented. And we have heard many success stories in different cities and countries, whether in high-income countries or also in low- and middle-income countries. So we have heard about the importance of political commitment, also the importance of having data to demonstrate the effectiveness of policies. And finally, a keyword, very important keyword of this conference is commitment. So we need commitment from government at local and regional level. We need commitment from civil society. We need commitment from the private sector. And finally, from each of us. A last word, ITF launched yesterday the Safe System tool, which allow a country, a city, a project to assess where it stands in its journey toward a safe system approach. So this tool is now available online, and I hope that you will all have a look and give us some feedback. So to end, I would just like to give a big applause to our panelists who made a fantastic discussion today. Thank you.